I could change the English language, I would be trying to separate what RACI looks like for a project versus how we talk about accountability and responsibility with roles, because everyone needs to slow down at the beginning of the project.
Welcome to the Disgruntled PM podcast, your weekly therapy session for the chaotic world of project management, transforming daily frustrations into real action. Welcome, everybody. I'm Trevor, the Disgruntled PM, joined today by my guest and the newly branded RACI lady, Kate Breed. So, Kate, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yes, well, thank you, Trevor. So I am a 15-year veteran of the project management world, and I have been focused in agency and consulting environments for most of my career. So my experience spans the gamut of anything from resource management to operations, and then my career actually started in internal communications, which is what has drawn me to, I guess, becoming the RACI lady now. Uh,
Well,
all goes full circle.
let's pause there and clarify that
Yes.
RACI is what?
RACI is. And so I am going to refer to it as a diagnostic tool during our conversation today. But RACI is a exercise at the beginning of a project where you are defining with your team who is accountable, responsible, consulted, and informed. So it's role clarity for the members of a project to help define how the work moves forward within a team environment. So
Yeah, I wanted
yes,
to
that version of RACI lady.
yes, wanted to clarify for
Yes.
because we are a family-friendly show.
Yes, very family friendly. Yes.
So we all know as PMs what a RACI is.
Yes.
Why pick that as your tool of choice to brand yourself with and your passion?
Yes. So I had been, as I said, I worked in the agency world I've been in that environment for well over a decade. And we were always focused on efficiency and how we work with our clients. Speed is our number one factor. And the big thing is we track time. So role clarity would matter because you need to repeat and template that as much as possible for efficiency of the contracts that I would be working on. And I had entered into, once I was in management, I had entered into a space where we were trying to do RACI and we are trying to make it fit for our contracts and the work we do, because most of the work involved a lead consultant, a project manager, and then support consultants on any contract. When I tell you I was in, I think, a 2 to 3 hour meeting one day going over a it, hundreds of lines of roles and responsibilities across each person. And the time that got invested in trying to do that within a agency environment and then present it, by the time the presentation happened, it went out the window. And it was so
And
frustrating. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and let me guess, when you put people under the responsible or accountable, they were saying, well, Steve and Jane can do it, or Steve's team can be there.
Yeah.
And they didn't understand the concept of one person responsible
Yes.
and one person accountable.
Exactly. So that's exactly it. So you get multiple people assigned, or you get to a level of detail that people can't absorb it. And so by the time you get to the artifact or the presentation that everyone's looking at, it's already forgotten because you can't use it in practice. So at the time, I was overseeing a PMO team of 9 project managers, and we started tooling around how do you use this better in practice? You take it out of the paper document or the slide deck that's put together at the beginning. And that's where we started to use it as a diagnostic tool to show us where there was a lack of clarity, there was something to work through, versus trying to change it into something that is, again, multiple line items that you end up going through and no one knows what was looked at and they've forgotten it by the time the ink is dry on the paper.
Yeah, it's just a giant Excel document that that no one looks at after we've gone through the 3-hour exercise of building it.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Yes. Yeah. And it's a big thing I always say as well with RACI is it gets a bad name, but I will say that Usually it gets a bad name because there's an avoidance of work people want to do to figure out the problem. And that's where I very much say it's a diagnostic tool. It's not meant to solve everything. And if you're trying to get it to solve everything, you're going to miss the whole point of doing it because it's not meant to fix. It's meant to bring up discussions. It's meant to fill out your risk registrar to risks that you need to look for during the length of your project.
One thing I like to use it for is for the distro lists,
Hmm.
because when you've got to, when you, at least when I would build RACIs, they would be templates of the project plan. So you would have kind of categorized
Yes.
lists of tasks, and I would go through those and I would just filter by who needs to be informed. And then
Yeah.
that was for my updates. Who needs to be consulted? Okay, well, now these are for decision makers, and
Hmm.
build out the distro list just based off of that alone. So I didn't have to go through and an analysis of myself. I would just
Yeah.
use the RACI for it.
Yeah, exactly. And what I'm going to say to that, because you bring up a good point, it's like usually there was a templated list that's used. Now, this is where I've been getting into a lot more discussions on this because I find that, and this is going to tie back to my internal communications background that I started in, is oftentimes RACI is used as a template to pick something up or just as you said, figure out who's informed. But I'm finding that there's a confusion even just in the language of the words we're using. So take accountability, for example. You can have accountability defined three different ways in the same meeting or the same office setting. So you take what's accountability to your job versus accountability to the project. Or you even have the meaning of somebody's like, you need to be held accountable for this. And you start to dissect just the language we're using in a meeting, and you can all of a sudden be confusing accountable versus responsible. And we don't make it easy at all because I see those words thrown out with multiple meanings in the same setting. And people are trying to all of a sudden then separate in their head what's that look like to the project versus to their job description and the clarity of what their role is there.
Yeah, you already beat me to where I was going to go next with that.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I've, I've actually written about this extensively is talking about definitions of words up front in a meeting. And
Hmm.
to your point about that, one of the things I would always do on RACIs or other things, other artifacts like that, I would actually put like a note where if you hover over the letter, it would give a call out box, and I would put what that definition is
Yeah.
in that call out box. So if somebody's looking at what it is, everybody knows if you're looking at what you're responsible for, that's what responsibility means. This is what accountability means.
Hmm.
And consulted means I just got to tell you I'm doing something. It doesn't mean you have say in the matter usually.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I was just talking about this week where just to focus on consulted a bit, it's even figuring out consulted versus informed is a line because it's so easy. Like take the organization I was working in. We had 50 to 60 consultants, and then it was the PM team of 9. And you all of a sudden can quickly bleed into everyone gets an opinion versus whose opinion is qualified for the project we're doing here. And that becomes a big thing to think about is it's not trying to pull in every voice or no voices. It's trying to get to that median lane of how do you pull in an individual who can represent the group or somebody who can represent the subject matter that needs pulled in versus I've seen so many times where people get worried they're leaving somebody out, so then they default to consulting everyone and nothing gets done at that point.
Yeah. And that reminds me of you mentioned to somebody, hey, this meeting's going on. And then they say, oh, can you send me the invite? And they
Yeah.
have no purpose being in that meeting.
Yeah.
And 9 out of 10 times people are like, oh yeah, sure. Come on in. I'm the person that's like, no, you have no reason to be in this meeting. I don't
Hmm.
want you there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we use a lot of these tools almost I look at them as a filter tool to filter people out rather than in.
Exactly. There's a so earlier on when I was saying the diagnostic tool, I actually was using RACI for a while in the inverse way, figuring out what meetings to be in. And I know I'm taking it a bit out of the context of what's done at the beginning of a project, but because I operated in an environment where I had to bill my time, I had billing targets I had to meet. I had billable goals. And so the difference between me joining one meeting that's qualified as non-billable versus billable, that mattered in my time tracking. So I've used this story before where when I was overseeing our project management team, I also did resource management. So I was responsible for assignments of consultants to our contracts. And there was a meeting that I was invited to regarding the promotion of one of our consultants and whether they should get promoted to a senior consultant or not. And when I got that invite, you already have so many meetings in your day. And I'm going, well, wait a minute here. All right. So I'm in charge of resource management and the PMO team. Why am I getting invited to a meeting for the promote to see whether somebody's promoted to a senior consultant? I have no technical credibility here. Like I can't decide that. And so I kindly reached out to the manager and I was like, hey, why'd you invite me? And they were like, oh, well, you, with resourcing, if we promote this individual, they're going to be outpriced for the contract they're on, which is a very valid point
Hmm.
because we have our profitability to manage. And I went, okay, so I'm not accountable for this promotion decision. I don't have a responsibility here attached to how it's carried out. There might be work that happens as a result of that decision, but that isn't something that requires me to even be consulted on. Because again, I have no technical credibility. I shouldn't be deciding promotions for our consultants. And so I very kindly was just like, you know what? I just need informed. That is all I need. And it just changed the game for how I was approaching my time management at work and even recommendations I gave to my team because I was going, all right, there's RACI for the project, but also let's look at the language of it. What are you accountable, responsible for, even with your job? And use that as a decision for what meetings you're in or not. Because it quickly stands where I was able to say, you know what? I just need informed. Whether this contract needs restaffed with another consultant or not, that's going to be work for me to take as a result of whatever decision you land on. And that person did get promoted, by the way. I want to say that out loud.
And I was working for a very high profile consulting firm, and I had that actually happen to me, exactly what you just described, where
Hmm.
I was a higher level consultant on a program. I got moved to a separate contract where I was overpriced,
Yeah.
and I wound up taking a pay cut for that contract because that's what
Yeah.
happened, and
Hmm.
that's life sometimes.
Yeah. It's
But
entirely it.
but at the same time, there was a lot of stuff that went on in the background that I was working with leadership on, and one of the things I will highlight of that whole story was attitude made a difference,
Yes.
because when I got moved from one higher paying contract to a lower one and had to take a pay cut, I found out a year later when I left that company that my attitude of not having sour grapes, not yelling and screaming and kicking up a storm and doing all the emotional reaction stuff publicly,
Mhm.
having the conversation with my managers, talking to them and just being like, "Okay, can we work with this? Can we do anything?" Wound up being probably about an extra $5,000 that the contract couldn't afford, but the
Mhm.
company was willing to absorb it elsewhere just to keep me, just as a thanks for not being a jerk.
Yeah. It makes such a difference. So the agency, consulting firm, call it what you want, because we even would switch lanes of how we refer to it internally. We were eventually acquired by a much larger agency and wonderful group of people. But where we started was, as I said, it was a group of 60 people. And the mission that the founder set forward was all in like the better workplace. And that was such a phenomenal mindset, like with the employees, because what you said, we always sort of let ourselves with that angle of transparency, that radical candor that I don't know if you've read the
Mhm.
book, but
I've
that was a
heard the
big
term.
book. Yes, yes, that was a book we were all recommended to read, and that, as you said, it's like that attitude, that transparency, that thinking through of it's gonna go a long way with any employer.
And moving it back to the racy, one of the exercises I like to do when meetings start getting out of control, as PMs, we're privy to usually what's the blended rate for labor based off of whatever the categorization is, whether it's a blended rate for by department, blended rate for FTE versus contractor, that kind of
Yes.
thing. I would sit there and I would look at some of my meetings that were getting out of control, and I would just figure out how much, okay, the blended rate is this for directors, the blended rate is this for senior managers, and start counting up and do the math. And I'd say, this is how much money this meeting is costing us in directors. This is how,
So that's something we all do, is what I'm hearing, right?
yeah. But what I would do is I would do that math and then I would send it out to the distro list of the meeting and say, who does not need to be here
Yeah.
to make this meeting a little bit more affordable. And it's funny because you wouldn't be putting out specific numbers that weren't public facing information within
Mhm.
the organization, but when you start putting those numbers to paper and start putting those numbers out, people start to realize it.
Mhm. It's so true with it because I think we've got a huge meeting problem and no one I feel like very few people would argue with me on that. So it's not a hot take at all. But most meetings just happen out of habit. And one of the things I'm actually a huge advocate for with anyone is time tracking because even if you're not privy to the blended rate or the rates that you're able to get to that calculation, anyone knows what their salary is and you're able to get down to an
Mhm.
idea of what your hourly cost is within an organization. And you start looking at the impact of your time in meetings, out of meetings, meetings you're just joining and you're a camera off, trying to eat lunch during because you just don't wanna be on at that point anymore and you're just there.
Nobody's done that.
Yeah.
Nobody's done that.
Never. Never. And so it's something that I recommend for everyone because I think all we have in our jobs, I find, is it's your credibility, and that's based off your decisions and your track record with decisions. And for anyone out there who doesn't track time, by doing that, you're able to see what meetings am I just joining that I'm there to be informed. And am I stressed out at the end of my day because I'm spending half my day in meetings that I'm just informed in that communication could come in other ways than sitting in a meeting for all that time. Because I did the exact exercise you did. You sit in a meeting, you're going, this is $1,000 for 30 minutes time, and as a manager, you start to think through benefits and perks for employees.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, you're going, "This is not worth the cost of what we're getting out of it."
Well, I'll take that 2 steps further and say, think about when you look at your day and you've got wall-to-wall meetings.
Yes.
That's it's the badge of honor that you're so busy all day.
Mhm.
And I think back to a conversation I had with someone probably about 6 months ago. I hadn't talked to the guy in forever, and we were just catching up, and he said, "How you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm busy." And he looked at me, he's like, "Are you busy or are you productive?"
Yeah.
And it just that one question stopped me in my tracks, and from that moment on, I've started reframing everything I do from saying I'm busy to I'm trying to be productive because I wrote about this that I built an Eisenhower matrix for priorities.
Mhm.
That's the four boxes. And
Yes.
when you start figuring out where your priorities are versus where you're just killing time,
Yeah.
you start to really see pictures of your day and those meetings that you were talking about where the camera's off and you're sitting there, you're in the meeting, but you're doing literally everything else except for paying attention to what's being said in the meeting.
Mhm.
You might as well just skip that meeting altogether, not show up and get admin work done, or maybe even get time to eat lunch.
Yeah, exactly. I actually quickly after I got promoted, I went from a senior PM position to director of consulting services before I eventually led our PMO team. And one of the first things that came up, it was during the pandemic that our owners were having an issue that during our all company meetings every week, a lot of people would end up off camera.
Mhm.
And they saw that as a signal of people are not engaged. Because we went for context here. I tell people I was working remotely before it was cool. I was started with my employer in 2018 and we were never on camera with clients. So, like, it was off camera. I knew people's voices for years before I ever saw their face on a screen because who would be on camera with somebody at a corporation at that point? And the second the pandemic happened, everything was on camera. So we went from maybe 20% of our day on camera to 80, 90% of the day. And there's an amount of fatigue when you're constantly in a conversation with the client the whole day, and you get that one meeting, the all company meeting, and you're going, oh my goodness, thank goodness here I can turn the camera off, I can eat lunch. And I went, that's not a signal of distrust. Like, the whole environment just changed on how we're working here, and we can't use that as that point of reference here of what works and doesn't.
Yeah, I remember I worked for a major corporation and they had we would have quarterly town halls.
Hmm.
And what's funny is during those town halls, you never even saw anybody's camera or anything
No.
because it was all presenting. And
Yeah.
that went back to, is this a worthwhile of my time? Because
Mhm.
most of those are cheerleading sessions. They're not
Yes.
actually beneficial to the company.
Yeah.
Like you could send that. That's the definition of this meeting could be an email.
Exactly. It's exactly it. Yes. Yeah. So it's huge. I have many opinions around that. I'll say that.
Yeah. And I mean, taking this all the way back to your focus of the RACI again, looking at that and actually determining, do people need to be here?
Hmm.
Do we want them there? Or are they there because their role or position dictated that we have to invite them out of professional courtesy? And I'd argue that you're doing them a favor by not inviting them rather than having them there for professional courtesy.
Exactly. Yeah. People want their time respected. That's what they want. They want to be informed. They want to have their time respected. And the biggest thing you can do is take that due diligence to evaluate what is going to serve your audience, because we all get stuck too often on what's going to serve what we think is going to serve us, or what it's focused at us versus the people on the receiving end who want to hear it.
And I also look at some of that stuff as PMs, we learn people's personalities, we learn
Yeah.
their tendencies, we learn their behaviors.
Hmm.
There's some people I look at on lists and I'm like, I don't want you there because you're going to make this meeting more painful than it needs to be.
Oh, it's so dangerous, because I think going back to, I was talking about consulting, because there's so within RACI, I find accountability is the one of the most loaded. It's the most loaded letter, I think, in RACI, and then consulted is a quick number two on that list. And it's because with consulted, you run into the very thing you just mentioned, where it's like you don't want certain people in the meeting, or and that's where I'm trying to talk more about the language of what it means to decide who's consulted versus not in a project, because you run into so many politics at work, and it starts to influence who's involved and who's not. So let's take, where you're saying you're trying to avoid having somebody in the meeting who you know is going to derail it, that more often than not, I think consulted creates a lot of issues within workplaces, because you get to the end of a project and you've got people who were not informed, who should have, or not consulted, that should have been consulting, or you have people who just by human nature were going, that person is so difficult, I don't want to work with them, I want them off to the
I've
sidelines.
never dealt with one of those people. I don't know who you're
Never.
talking about. I mean, usually
Never.
I'm that person.
Yes.
Usually that's me that's the
Oh my
difficult one.
goodness. Yes. That was the one beauty, I will say, of working in an agency. We had a number of clients that we'd have over the years, and they would bounce across project managers. You'd have those, or I'd have those moments where I'd have a client and I'd just go, is this me? Are they just a difficult client for me? And then the contract would eventually land with another PM, and you'd go, thank goodness it's not me.
Well, and I want to highlight something else too I think we'll call it a myth of the RACI.
Yeah.
And that is that consulted doesn't mean that you're a decision maker. Consulted could just
No.
mean you're in that gray zone of sometimes we want your opinion, but we don't always want your opinion.
Yeah. 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 So true. And it's the amount of time I spend thinking about this is much longer than anyone should, because I've joked about this, but I truly mean it. That I've told people, I've said that my mission is to go back and fix the first group project that everyone was ever involved on, because that's where I think we all sort of fall into our roles. So the thing I've told people is, it's like I became a project manager at age 12, not when I got like the PM title. It's because you're all of a sudden that like half your grades based on how well the whole group collaborates, and you've got some people doing all the work, others not doing any of it. And we don't leave that behind. And I think if anything, we make it so much messier when we get into the workplace, because you get somebody who They want the authority, but they don't want the accountability. They want the ability to make decisions, but then they don't want to. They don't want to have any of the blame cast on them. And it's why I'm such. I almost, if I could change the English language, I would be trying to separate what RACI looks like for a project versus how we talk about accountability and responsibility with roles, because everyone needs to slow down at the beginning of the projects and really start to go, I am accountable for this, or I am responsible. Like, we all have to almost have this exchange of words back and forth. I liked how you said it, of just the defining of the terms and speak it out loud, because people don't people will default to the, I need to show value, so I need to look like I'm taking more responsibility than I might be in reality, but I'm going to hide if anything goes wrong, and default it to the whole team messed up, or all those issues that come with that.
Yeah, and I think that's a great place to pause to talk about the Patreon that I have, because that's how I help fund the show. That's how I help
Yes.
pay for all this stuff that I do. And with subscription on the Patreon, you get access to the postmortem interviews, which are bonus conversations that I have with every single guest, and Kate is included in that.
Hmm.
And in Kate's postmortem interview, we're going to be talking about how frameworks are not the problem, and how project management looks different across consulting, corporate, and working within agencies, because those are all three entirely different worlds. But once
Yes.
again, we use the same term for all of them.
Hmm.
So I want to shift back to which you touched on there, your first project is usually what frames you for your career. And
Yes.
I always like to use the term, show me on the internet where the bad man hurt you
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
we start talking about some of these behaviors. Because to your point about the whole, I want the authority without the responsibility, it's like, then project management is not the right profession for you.
No.
Because I can't remember if I've told this story before, but I was in a networking group, and I had someone tell me they were looking into project management. And I said, oh, okay, that's cool. And he was like, I'm a functional manager now in a corporate environment, and I want to move into project management because I don't want to be responsible for people. And I just laughed. Exactly.
Exactly.
I just laughed, and I told him, you are going to he was like, I don't want the responsibility that I have now, but I want to be in charge. And I just looked at him and said, the project management is not the world for you, because you get all the negative things you're looking at about your job, and none of the positives of actually being in charge, because we lead through influence, not through authority. Like, any resource I have, if they tell me, oh, I didn't get that done because my boss told me this took priority, what do I say?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it's one of the, again, the beautiful things of working in an agency environment is you get to try on a bunch of different companies and teams and environments, and you start to learn their dysfunction or where they're doing things well. Like, I know one of the agencies I worked for, we actually had members of our team go work for our one of our clients, because it was such a well-run machine of a client that they were like, well, I want to work there. Because agencies, by default, you grind a little more in that environment than
Mhm.
you do in others. And you can quickly work 50, 60-hour weeks without blinking. But then you also see the bad. Like, I sort of developed my sense of when things were going to go wrong at the beginning of a project, like we all do. It's not unique to me here. I knew
Think for
often,
yourself. All of my
right?
projects ran perfectly, right down
All
to
of them.
the letter of the project plan, dates,
Yeah.
dependencies. Nothing got off track,
Nothing ever got
ever.
off track.
No,
Never.
no.
And I would run into issues with when our main point of contact was a higher title. Typically, that was a early red flag for us that we were going to be running into problems. If you had like a VP title as the main point of the contact on your like marketing campaigns, and they're bigger than a 10-person startup, that's where you're going, why do I have this high of a title talking to one of my project managers and like a mid-level consultant, and they are in every single detail. And that's where you start to see this whole different world of how each client operates, or you see the clients who you are working with a entry level employee, it's their first job out of college and they're your main point of contact. We share our billable hours reports with our clients, and then we're getting escalations with their manager's manager because they're new to the working world and we're sort of helping them get their footing, but also trying to manage our time on how everything works.
Yeah, and I think that's a very important thing to think about because if you've ever been a contractor, like a 1099 contractor or a
Hmm.
consultant, your hours are logged to where
Yeah.
if you say if I'm not getting paid, I'm not working,
Yeah.
but then you transfer that over to a full-time employee who's salaried, they're working technically 24/7.
Hmm.
So so I would always enjoy being able to say, "Oh, out of hours for the week.
Yeah.
You gonna pay overtime?"
Yeah.
That was not even that was a rhetorical question 90% of the time.
Yeah.
And then they just look at you going, "Okay, well, what do we do with you now?" I'm like, "Nothing.
Yeah. Just let it be.
I'm out of hours. We'll
Yeah.
come back next week."
Yeah. It was always that was my favorite contracts we always had were time and materials because it was like by the meter up to a certain budget, and it made all the difference in managing it versus the ones that were under a retainer or we had a set outcome. Because all of our consultants, well, I would say the majority were full time, but we would then manage the utilization rate of the
Mhm.
team of how billable everyone was versus non billable time. And so the amount of hours I spent looking at utilization rates for the project managers versus the consultants took so much time and effort over the years.
Yeah, and I remember we had a consultant who I was at a company and we were implementing a massive tool, and the
Hmm.
consultant was on site 2 to 3 times a month.
Yeah.
And I would always ask, "Why are you here so much?" And then it was before virtual meetings, so they were always there running workshops, and we would spend 7 hours a day with them in a workshop in a conference room, everybody's day blocked off, and
Hmm.
my head was spinning half the time because I was new to the organization, but it was just
Yeah.
one of those I wish now looking back, I could have seen the budget of that project to know how everything was being leveraged and utilized
Hmm.
and all that because until you actually know, you don't know what to look for or what to see to be asking questions.
Yeah. And the trickier part we would sometimes run into as well. I don't know if you've had this experience where you have some projects you have all the lessons learned, the dashboards, you know how profitable it was. So you know how it gets scoped or where there's the red flags going into it. Our trickiest part was when we were managing a new skill with a contract or something that we were less experienced in. You're still trying to manage scope, but you're consulting and learning. So it was a much trickier budget for us to constantly keep on top of because it was more in the lane of we're being innovative versus we are doing that tried and true rinse and repeat. And it would create so many planning issues for us because you're trying to time when contracts can come in. Like I was responsible for meeting with our head of sales and giving him like a we can start this in 3 weeks based on what the bandwidth is of our team, but it just takes one project to blow up and then all of a sudden your 3 week start for the next contract is at risk because you've got this other project that now all of a sudden has gone way over scope. You have all these additional hours added to it that you're figuring out, and it was a constant jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, I was on the other side of that one a lot of times where I would get recruited by contracting companies
Hmm.
and they'd be like, "Well, we want to use your resume for the proposal, and if
Yeah.
we win the proposal, then we'll hire you." And I'd be like, "Okay,
Yeah.
well, when's the RFI due? When's the RFP due? When are the decisions? When is the projected start date?" And I would just get like the funniest story. I was interviewing for a role with a consulting company. They
Hmm.
were looking to hire me for a specific project, and I sat through the interviews and I was like, between the HR manager, the functional manager, the contract manager, I went through like 4 interviews with 4 different people. And every time I'd ask the basic questions, I got 4 different answers.
Oh no.
From things like the contract has already been awarded by the government to Well, we
No.
just finished design and we're waiting for approval for this next phase where we need the PM. And I just sat there looking at all this going, how? Just how? Like, I don't understand. And
Yeah.
I've worked for consulting companies too, but it was just the funniest thing because I was just, PMs talk and we're all sharing
Mhm.
stories. And I was like, what am I missing here? And I was even talking to HR people that I know, and everyone was just like, nobody is talking to each other to even get the right cover story for you.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's true. There's so many warning signs too, where going into it, you're going, This isn't going to be good." Because I had a friend who he works for a consulting company, and he became the fourth project manager on this. The contract value meant nothing if you looked at the size of the company he's
Mhm.
with, and he immediately knew. He's like, "I'm coming in at this number PM, and you haven't been able to figure it out, and you just keep thinking replacing the PM is gonna fix it."
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like, the one story I'll tell people is, like, my first year at my last company, I was a project manager on a contract with a senior consultant who absolutely phenomenal person, and she just has so much expertise in her knowledge area. And we have our first call. Again, I'm sort of new to the organization, trying to get my footing. And we quickly heard from our main stakeholders that we were the third agency brought in to try to fix the problem. And if we didn't figure it out, they were going to be fired. And it was one of those where you're early on, you're going, because it was and it was like the consultant I worked with was extremely knowledgeable, but we're still in we're in one of those like innovative projects where it was newer, the skill
Mhm.
set to our team. And you're going, well, great. We're trying to figure this out. You just told us we're group three brought in, and you're not going to have a job if we don't figure this out here. And that's where I say all of a sudden you try on different companies and you figure out this is not a great company you want to be a part of. It's something where you just see these warning signs so quickly coming in, or you hear it directly from them. And unfortunately, in that situation, they weren't trying to say that to scare us or threaten us. It was more of a, this is our last ditch effort to figure this out. And she figured out the problem for them, but still, eventually their jobs were not there anymore. And that's that change you run into with a bunch of different types of clients.
Yeah, and I think that having worked in the innovation space and doing first of its kind projects in the
Hmm.
country, I would sometimes argue that you go into some of those so blindly naive about what you're doing. It's
Yes.
actually better than going
Yeah.
in there going, I know what I'm doing. Because if you say you know what you're doing and you've done this project 100 times, and
Hmm.
then the company that you're working with says, I don't like point C out of your 10-point plan, it puts you on tilt because now you're looking at this as my successful recipe has changed.
Yeah. Hmm.
And
Entirely it.
and then you're on tilt and you're confused and you're off balance and you're not, whereas if you walk in, I don't know anything, free as a bird, you're like, okay, well, let's see what everybody else failed at. And then
Hmm.
it kind of creates a different perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something that those projects always stand out to me because it's like you're doing something new, and but what you come away from it is also stays with you forever on that. Like I think back to some of the projects I was on that, again, like you said, it's like you go in perhaps blind or green to it, but you walk away with going, you see the world in a whole new way a little bit after that, versus the
Yeah.
one where you're trying to protect your expertise, your credibility, what you've done 10 times over.
That's why almost every kickoff meeting I say, I am the dumbest person in the room because my expertise is in project management. Because as PMs, we are not expected to be SMEs in anything other than that.
Yeah. Yeah.
In an ideal organization, if you're an SME in the topic that your project is on, odds are you're going to be the problem more than the solution.
Yeah. Yeah. I always told people, I said, I know enough to be dangerous, but not enough to be helpful on the subject matter. It only ever got me into trouble one time where I had a client who didn't like the consultant they were working with. And the consultant didn't care for them either. And the client would start to hit me with technical questions. And you're going, I am not your person. Like, we can look at what we do here, but it's not me.
Yeah. Yeah. I enjoyed those conversations because I would just look at, I actually just saw something about this someone talking about don't let anyone know you know how to use Excel.
Yeah.
And I said to them, I was like, you know what? When I knew something that was dangerous to let people know I knew, I would just play
Would do
dumb.
that.
I
Yeah.
would just play dumb and I would be like, how do you do that? Let's search it really quick and
Yes.
then pretend like I'm learning it on the fly, even though
Yeah.
I already knew everything.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
they'd be like, oh, you're a quick learner. I'm like, yeah, that's it. The instructions were great.
Excel's it's the modern day copy machine where it's like you never admitted you knew how to fix the copy machine working in an office. So,
Well,
yeah.
I came up with AI is the new Excel.
Yes.
Because if you say you know how to use AI and you understand how it works, then it's, well, teach me. Okay,
Yeah.
how many hours, how much time do you have to learn the fundamentals? Because if you don't understand the basics of how this works,
Yeah.
teaching you how to get one specific outcome is going to be great. But if you change that outcome, if you change that request,
Yeah.
you're completely lost.
They're going to come back to you every time then and ask
Exactly.
you to help with the new request. Yeah.
Just like Excel.
Yes. Oh,
So,
it's so true.
so now I think that's a great place for us to get to the question, my specialized question for the guest.
Yes,
So you have your private pilot's license, correct?
I do. Yes.
And you do that as a hobby, we'll say?
Yes.
So have you ever had to explain to your family that maintaining currency and all the expenses of that are a functional requirement for better vacations?
My spouse, he's actually I tell people I married a great one, but we poorly picked each other in that we both have expensive hobbies. He likes cars, I like planes, and that doesn't help. So he's actually the one out of the two of us who's been advocating because we like to go up to Lake Michigan every year. He's like, if we had a plane, we could get there in like 2 hours versus the 6 hour drive that we have. So, and I kept going like, do you want the kids to go to college or do we want faster flights right now? So,
And then you have to say that 2-hour flight turns into a 3-hour flight for detours because you need
right.
more time for currency.
Oh, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly. It's all common sense. I don't understand why people don't get it,
It's
right?
entirely it. Entirely it. I will say, I think it's out of view here. I've got propellers all over my home. So, yeah, that's always the other joke is that I'm not allowed to get any more propellers in our house because I have a few up and around here.
Expensive hobbies.
Yes.
Yeah. And then you create a business and then you find the ultimate expensive hobby.
I don't know how to do things affordably, apparently.
I'll leave that one alone.
Oh, yeah.
So I want to hand the floor over to you. Let the audience know where they can find you, what you're up to, all that great stuff.
Yeah, people can find me on LinkedIn. So just search Kate Breed. My banner at the top of my profile says the RACI lady. So that's how you will know you found me. And what I am doing right now is I'm working with teams. I also work with people one-on-one, and I am focused on team dynamics within projects. So it's RACI, it's role clarity within teams, and that is my passionate hybrid between my internal communications background and project management. And it's getting that group project to work better. So people can find me there.
Yeah, and I'll have a link to your LinkedIn in the show notes.
Thank you.
So it's easy to find. There
Yes.
aren't many Kate Breeds on the internet.
They're not. No, no.
Although I do know of one other Trevor Greenberg in the US.
Really?
And yes, because I got his insurance bill.
Wow. I wouldn't have expected that. Yeah. Because I haven't found many other Cape breeds. There's a few, but not a ton. So,
Yeah, unlike my wife who has a very common first and maiden name
yeah.
to the point where when we lived in a small town there were two of them and they had to be separated by the middle initial.
Oh, no.
And she's one of those people that got her email as her name with a
Yeah.
very common name.
Yeah.
So she gets all kinds of wrong people's email too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so now's the time where I also thank the Patreon subscribers, thank the listeners and everybody that's helping me keep this show going. I want to remind everybody that it's really easy to help support the show for free by just liking, subscribing, sharing it out if you enjoy it. Tons of great guests in the back catalog as well as upcoming. If Kate is not your speed, then there's always somebody else. But Kate's awesome, so she's everybody's speed. And I'll end like I always do. Mail your little Let's start that one over. And that's not being fixed in post. May all your deliverables be on time, your budget's in the black, and your scope not creeping. For Kate Breed, I'm still Trevor, and I'm still the disgruntled PM. Thanks for listening.